What's up everyone, how you guys doing? And in today's video we're talking about the early 5-star characters. Now my last video I made a video about Zhongli and I talked a lot about him, and then as I'm working I realized that Zhongli is a pretty old character but he's still really relevant. And so what about the other like 1.x, the 1.0 to 1.6 release characters? How do they fare in today's context, right, or in today's meta? And so that's what this video is all about. We're ranking them. We'll show the tier list later. And really want to look at the characters and see like how have they aged over the years. And so obviously if you like, if there's a character that you like and there's a character that you think like, that you disagree with, like maybe I rank them too low, let me know your experience down in the comment section below. And of course, we'll be talking about them and see like whether they are still holding up in like 5.2. And so before we begin, And so before we begin, if you like this video, like, share, comment, subscribe, all the good stuff, and let's begin. Okay, very first, let's talk about Venti, who is the animal Archon. Venti, I think, is interesting because I talked about this in the Archons video. Venti's whole thing is about like crowd control. He works very well against like small mobs and like tiny enemies like your slimes, like your even like the humanoid characters, or even like your Hilichurls. He works very well against them. But when it comes to like bigger enemies, like your boss enemies, for example, Inspire Abyss, he tends to suffer quite a bit in value. I do think that maybe Genshin could create a game mode where you could excel him, like a pure fiction equivalent, not saying copy and paste pure fiction, but like a game mode where there's a lot of like small enemies, where there are a lot of like multi waves, where Venti is able to control them at the same time. I think that would be really nice for content in the game. And I think that it's just that Venti is one of the characters that is most affected by whatever content Hoyoverse puts out. And I think that at least in the current scheme of things, he isn't as optimal. And so this is the tier list that I made. Basically, this is we have 4 tiers. The top dogs, which are like the top of the meta, obviously still relevant, so maybe a setback, but they're still very strong. Situational, depends on like the game state and everything, which is where I'll put Venti in. And last ones are not that great. Maybe they require a lot of investments, maybe they're not very intuitive, like they're very clunky, right? Or maybe they're just power crap like very badly, or maybe the kit doesn't make sense. So this is where this goes. And I think Venti isn't really power crap, right? But I think that Venti just needs that game mode or that niche for him to excel in. And I think that Hoyoverse doesn't have it. Like I said, if he was in like Star Rail and like and he was in like pure fiction, I think he'll do very well. But I think that Genshin doesn't have that, and unfortunately that's where he loses a lot of value, because there's nothing for players to use him in, or ultimately use him in. Now let's talk about Klee, right? Klee Pyro Catalyst. And I think the one thing before we begin is that early Catalyst characters tend to be very clunky in usage, right? Because a lot of like they're always standing still and then you use them, their abilities, stuff like that. But Klee is very simple, right? Obviously you have a normal attack string. Jumpy Dumpty creates mines, which will explode and do damage. And her burst will enhance, it will empower her, and she's able to do the spark and splash that would deal a lot of damage. And also she has a chance to do a charged attack that doesn't require any stamina and deals additional damage. So early games, Klee was very standard, like Pyro DPS, Vaporize teams, for example, kind of thing. But I think over time, as like she got more clunky, her numbers weren't scaling as well. People started switching her to a more like sub DPS, especially with the C2, because the C2, the mines decreases the defenses by 23%, so it's very good in like certain team calls as a sub DPS, like for Lini teams, for example. Unfortunately, I think that she has fallen down due to the times, and I think that of course people that use Burgeon with her, which I think looks very fun, very like very apt for Klee. But unfortunately in this day and age, I think that Klee, you either had to invest very heavily into like artifacts or even like pull constellations for her. And so when it comes to like the tier list, I think in my personal opinion, I think she's not that great. She's not that great, that doesn't mean she's bad, but I think that you have to really put a lot more into her than like other characters. Okay, so now let's carry on with the list and let's talk about the 1.1 characters. Let's start off with Childe. Child's character I put on like his second rerun. And I think that Childe is a great character. One of the things I like about Childe is that he's a lot more versatile to play. He can play, he doesn't specialize in like a certain type. He can play in like single target or AoE, although I do prefer to play AoE content because of his Riptides. Basically, for those of you who do not know, his Riptides, there are many kinds of Riptides that he has. I think he has like 4. He has like Riptide Blast, Riptide Slash, everything. But basically the Riptides are like additional attacks that can be spread onto enemies as long as they have the mark, right? They are able to gain a mark, or basically be affected by Riptide, right? One of the things about changing him to his melee stance, the longer you are in his melee stance, the longer the cooldown once you switch back into him. And so the thing is that Childe does have, you can see, right, his longest cooldown is up to 45 seconds. So it's so definitely the longer you stay into him, the higher his cooldowns. And so I think that Childe in general is a character that you do have to actively learn. He is pretty good if you do manage to know his rotations, how long to stay in, know which abilities to use, how to apply Riptide and how to spread it. That being said, I think that because he isn't as like straightforward, let me talk about constellations first. He isn't as straightforward to use. I think that some players may be deterred from using him. I didn't play him for a very long time, but only when I started to actually pick him up and learn him again that I actually understand. But I understand him more. But I also understand that for players who don't want to take the extra effort to do it, right? He does have okay constellation. I still think his C1 is pretty fine, right? I do think now his weapon is a lot better than his C1. But I think his weapon isn't the worst thing in the world. His C1 is the worst thing in the world. But he does get additional damage, and then when you use the this one is the burst, you actually reset the cooldown. But it's at C6, which is very expensive. But you don't really need him. I also have him at C0, so it's fine. That being said, I think that Childe really falls into the situational category as well. I think that he is almost at the still relevant category, but unfortunately we do have a lot more hydro DPS. We have more Lani, we have the what's this thing called, we have Neuvillette, obviously, and obviously he's not really played as a main DPS, playing more as a driver nowadays in the Xiangling team. But that being said, I think that he is still pretty good. But I think that he's definitely a lot of an older character, and definitely there have been replacements for him that I don't think like he's a character that you wouldn't feel mad if you miss him out unless you really like the character himself. All right, Zhongli. I thought a lot about him in the video. I just put him here. I think that Zhongli is very comfortable. He's a very good shielder. Obviously, shielding means you don't die, you don't take damage and everything. I do think that the reason why I will put Zhongli here is because Zhongli, I think we have to accept that Zhongli will never allow players or DPSs to hit their full potential, because you are basically giving the slot that he takes can be given to be a support on our DPS, but because he doesn't really make up for their damage loss, right? And so I think that that's the reason. But I think that Zhongli in total, he is able to at least make newer players, especially on mobile, a lot more comfortable in the way they play the game. And so I think that is still like very valuable, right? he's a very training wheels kind of character. But I think that the shields, at the very least, like if you're facing like really hard content, you can just slap it in. And I think that's like, and the fact that he can plug into every team, right, is really, really nice as well. Okay, next. And so yeah, before going to the next character, so that's really about it. As I mentioned, I thought a lot more about him in the last video about Zhongli, so I really don't want to like repeat too many of the points that I made. But as I mentioned, Zhongli is just very comfortable, very, very good. He does have a bit of crowd control through his burst, but I think that the main thing is that he protects the characters, he makes them take less damage, but you also have to accept that he also makes your team deal out less as well. Albedo, Geo sword character. I think Albedo is in my opinion, Albedo is a very good character. He's basically a character that felt like they just took elements of everything and just put them together, and that didn't really make sense, right? He's a very unharmonious character, basically. If you look at his abilities, you notice one thing is that his skills of defense, while his burst doesn't. Actually, skills of attack at least at C0. The C2 kind of fixes this, right? If the C2 kind of fixes this, so if you want to pull Albedo and want to hyper invest, the C2 is pretty good. That being said, obviously, yeah, split scaling means that you either like split your investments that doesn't really maximize the damage, or you just focus on his skill. And also like Albedo's abilities, the elemental mastery increase for the team for the team. It's also like very weird. Maybe in the early days it made sense, but nowadays like you wouldn't really use him for this, because first and foremost, like Nahida in most cases, unless you build a Nahida wrongly, will give out more. And at the same time, Albedo, like I said, you wouldn't really want to use the teams that he is like used in. Don't really want EM, and even you use him in like teams that are like Vaporize or like Burgeon, like there are better options as a fourth. And so like I think Albedo is in that very, very weird situation where like he doesn't even fit into geo teams, right? Because nowadays like Ito has his own what's his thing called, like he has Shilonen and stuff. So unfortunately for Albedo, I think that he is in the not that great category. I'll say that even Klee is better than him, because he feels like a mess, right? Maybe it's early game design, but he feels very like a mess, like his constellations are everywhere, his abilities are everywhere. And I think that he wouldn't be mad if you like didn't pull him. All right, let's talk about the next one, which is Ganyu. Ganyu, I think, obviously, the one thing that will always divide players about Ganyu is her playstyle, which is very hard shot based. Some players like it, some players don't. So this is really like, you pick your poison kind of thing. But I think one of the great things about Ganyu is that she has a taunt, and also has decent cryo application through her burst. So you can play her many ways. First of all, you can play her both in freeze and in vaporize, which is not vaporize, sorry, melt teams, which can be very good because you're not locked into one reaction. As we have seen with freeze has like dropped off quite a lot, but at the very least, Ganyu has a backup. And so at the same time, right, she played as a hyper carry, as a main DPS, but she had also been played as a sub DPS through her burst. So invest more into her burst, invest more into the ER so she can burst more often, but then she's able to provide a lot of cryo application for like melt teams. Her C1 is also pretty nice to shred cryo resistance, so that can be very nice to maximize her damage as well, especially you're playing her as a main DPS. So all in all, I think Ganyu can be still pretty relevant. I think that unfortunately Cryo's in a very weird spot, and so I think that because of that she is very situational, but I think she's like on the cusp. Like if we get like a cryo buff, or if we get like a melt buff, or like a melt support, or even like a free support, like I think she definitely goes up in value. But I think at the very moment she is very situational. But I do think she's very versatile, just like Xiao. I just think that maybe it's just the content that has been blocking her, just like Venti. All right, next one to talk about is Xiao. Xiao reminds me a lot of the Dragoons from like Final Fantasy. Very like plunge. You jump in the air, then you drop down and do attack. You attain that through your burst, and so and also he also has some like HP loss, so it actually kind of works well with Furina actually, which I'll talk more about in a while's time. But basically, Xiao is nice because Xiao just does like pure damage, and obviously over time people will say that damage is very easy to power creep, but I think that Xiao is very lucky in the sense that he got a lot of buffs through teammates. We obviously have Farazan. I know people always debate about is Farazan bad before C6. I don't think she is bad before C6, but like she is a complete character at C6, so that's that. But she also he also has buffs with Furina and Shen Yun, which helps increase his plunge attacks and the crit rate and everything. So I think that he is a character that has gotten better with teammates. I think not every character is as fortunate, as we'll talk about Eula later, but I think that at the very least, because of the changes that he's had to his kits, I think that he is in the relevant category. I think in terms of like DPS, it's probably a step down from like the Nuvolets and the Arlequinos, but I think that he's very competitive. And I think that with his new teammates, especially Furina and Shen Yun, definitely like got him to be more mobile. He also excels in both single target and AoE, and so I think that you know, he's really, really nice in the. He's a good character, right? If you have Shen Yun and you have Furina, he definitely comes a lot better. I think the one thing that kind of holds him back is that he doesn't really generate the most energy by himself, especially in his burst form. But you know, I think that with characters like Farzan and even Shen Yun to fix that, I think that he has gotten a lot better. Okay, so Hu Tao. Hu Tao is very like so Hu Tao is a very unconventional DPS in the sense that you want her to have lower HP, below 50%, especially to trigger her passive talent. But the thing is that Hu Tao is a very good DPS, vaporize or melt, mostly vaporize in this case, because she's able to infuse her normal attacks. She's able to do like charge attacks, right? And she's able to do a lot of damage. And of course, she's also able to convert her HP into attack. So yeah. Oh yeah, HP to attack. So she does a lot of damage when you build her with higher HP, which also helps because her weapon, the Sun Homer, increases that, and also like, yeah, if you have high HP, even if you're below 50%, right, which is where she wants to be, it means that your health pool is still bigger than like other characters. So it kind of helps her out quite a bit. Yeah, so she's just able to do a lot of damage. She's also able to heal herself through the burst. The more enemies you hit, the better the healing, and then you go back to like withering down your HP to do a lot more damage. I think, okay, so something that you know, was very hotly debated in the previous video was about her Constellations 1. I still think Constellation 1 is very, very nice. I think that people always say like, oh, use Shen Yun with her at C0, but you know, it's not really optimal. Even if you use her with like Yelan, like the Hydro, like the vaporized reactions isn't going to proc every turn. But you know, I think that even at C0 she can still be pretty good, and so I think that Hu Tao, and I think that Hu Tao has always been a very good character. I think a lot of people always make the case that Arlequino is better than her, and maybe Arlequino is better than her, but if you think about it, right, like in terms of single target, she still does very, very well. And I think that Hu Tao is still relevant today. Is it because Genshin's content isn't as hard that she's able to remain relevant? That I'm not gonna comment on it, but I think it's good because that means that you're not forced to pull for new characters. Because the inverse is that, you know, if power creep is very prevalent, then people can complain about needing to pull very, very often. So you know, it's another pick your poison kind of thing. I think personally, Hu Tao is still pretty good. I think that you know, I wouldn't be mad to pick her up if, you know, if I was like pulling for every character, for example. I still think that she's a very good character with very, very high single target potential. Eula Lawrence. So Eula is interesting because she is probably the strongest physical DPS. The problem is that physical DPS or physical damage isn't like the best thing in the game, obviously, because you know, you don't like Genshin Impact is a game based on elemental reactions where you get boosts for elemental reactions, whereas like obviously physical you don't get like any boosts unless you have buffs, but you can say they get buffs at the other elements as well, so that's kind of a moot point sometimes. She does have some resistance shred to physical through her skill, her whole skill, but Eula's basic whole thing, right, is through her burst, where it's a lot of back-loaded damage. So for players who play Honkai Star Rail, you're very familiar with Jing Yuan, where most of his damage comes from Lightning Lord, right? When Lightning Lord like rains, at least before Sunday, right? So pre-Sunday, like you had to wait for the lightning to come down, and you're trying your best to like buff up the Lightning Lord, right? If you don't crit, then it's going to be very miserable. So Eula is very, very dependent on critting. She also has a very high energy cost at 80, so you know, you had to build some ER into her, or like really feed her, or use like Raiden Shogun to actually like maximize. But basically you just want to really stack up the burst, and the thing is that the burst has on paper has a very nice like number, right? 367 for the life. Her life 4 is the main like part of her damage, and you could technically like stack this like quite a lot, because like 75 times 30 is like what, 2250. But I think at C0 R1 with the signature weapon, you can add a very max, or even with like Mika, you won't even hit like 20 unless you have like the C6. So like in like on paper, like you would never even like go past 20 unless you have like a lot of constellations on her. So the thing is that for Eula, like she's not very helped by a kid, she's not really helped by her teammates. Genshin kind of like neglected the physical. I know they had a shatter reaction buff recently, but the thing is that shatter doesn't increase her physical damage, only the shatter reaction. And so unfortunately it's only for that shatter thing that she gets buffed for, but not for the actual like her normal attack strings. So really, I think that Eula is definitely a very neglected character. And I think that on the tier list, I think that Eula is definitely in the not that great category. I think she's better than Albedo for some reason. Albedo is just sad. But at the very least, for Eula, I think that you have to, if you really want to maximize physical damage, you kind of have to really invest into her very heavily. All right, the very, very last one. The first 5-star that I ever put, who is Kazuha. Kazuha, great character. I was going to say this first. Kazuha's going to be the top on the list. He's going to be top dog. Kazuha is very, very simple. He is like, so he does have crowd control like Venti, not as strong, but the thing is that Kazuha is also a buffer, so he's able to also boost like the damage through his through his second ability based on how much EM he has. Also being able to hold the Viridescent Venom means you're able to shred the resistance of the elements that you swirl. So it's going to be very nice for a lot of content or a lot of teams where you have either Pyro, Electro, Cryo, or Hydro. So definitely a very good character to have in those teams. As I mentioned, he has a lot of grouping, so he works very well both in single target, both in AoE as well. But you're also able to like use him in single target very, very well. Except maybe for enemies that have like their own elements, like for example the Topa, where he's like always Hydro, right? So that can be a little bit hard. And maybe like but every thought more about Shilonen like in a while, but that's where like Shilonen kind of like excels a little bit more. But I think that Kazuha, for what he does, like he really is a very good character because he's able to do a lot for your team, especially as mentioned if you are part of any of the 4 elements. And even using like that like aggravate, right, he's able to increase like the electro damage for like aggravate teams, for example. So like a Ching, very, very nice, or even Chlorend, for example, in like with like Nahida. So I think that Kazuha himself is really, really great character. I know that people are going to talk about Shilonen, and I really thought about this in the Shilonen video. I think that on paper there are some situations where Shilonen is better, but there are also some situations where Kazuha is great as well. And just because Shilonen is good, I mean, it's sometimes even better in certain situations, Kazuha himself is so good that it doesn't really matter. You can just play him on like the other side, or you can play them together just for like extra damage. And so I think in this case, I think Kazuha is definitely top dog. And I think this is where the list is. So yeah, I think that Kazuha is definitely top dog of the characters. Then we have Zhongli, Xiao, and Hu Tao. Xiao very, very lucky to get buffs, but you know, it is what it is. And then situational, we have the Ganyu, Childe, and Venti. Venti, I don't think is power crap, as I mentioned. I just think that the content in the game doesn't suit his playstyle, and that is very, very unfortunate. And then lastly, we have Klee, Eula, and Albedo. I think Albedo is probably like last place out of the 10 characters that we got here. But let me know what you think in the comments down below. Let me know whether you think I'm wrong, whether you think Albedo should be top dog for the 5 of you who made him. And yeah, let me know your thoughts on this video, and let me know and about your experiences of any of the characters that you have. Once again, really appreciate you guys coming through, and I hope you guys have a great day. You guys stay safe. Do also know that I stream live on Twitch, link in the description below. And yeah, once again, like this video, share, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. I'll see you guys next time. Until then, stay healthy, stay safe, be good to yourselves and the people around you. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.